He was born in Harlem and raised in Mount Vernon, New York, the son of a man who left when he was young and a mother who worked hard enough to keep the family together, but never hard enough to outrun the financial pressure that defined their daily life. He dropped out of Howard University before finishing his degree, went back to New York, and spent his early 20s building a music career in an industry that had no institutional pathway for someone without connections, without a record deal, and without the kind of backing that the established music business required as the minimum entry condition. He built that career anyway, through force of personality, business intelligence, and a willingness to operate in the uncomfortable space between what existed and what he believed was possible. By his late 20s, he was one of the most commercially successful figures in the American music industry, but the music was never the full extent of what he was building. In 1998, Sean Combs launched Sean John with a clear and specific vision for what a fashion brand built from the inside of hip-hop culture could become. Within 5 years, it was generating $250 million in annual revenue. Within 7 years, it had won the Council of Fashion Designers of America Award for Menswear Designer of the Year, placing a self-taught designer from Harlem in the company of the most critically respected names in American fashion. This is the story of how one of the most driven men in the history of American entertainment built a fashion empire that the entire industry eventually had to take seriously. If you are new to this channel, welcome. If this kind of story is what brings you back, hit the like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Now let us get into it. Sean John Combs was born on November 4th, 1969, in Harlem, New York, the son of Melvin Earl Combs and Janice Combs. His father, Melvin, was connected to the street economy of New York in ways that made his presence in the family's life both complicated and ultimately brief. When Sean was 2 years old, his father was shot and killed in Central Park in an incident connected to the world he had been operating in, leaving Janice Combs to raise Sean and his sister Keisha alone in circumstances that were immediately more precarious than they had already been. Janice moved the family to Mount Vernon, just a small city just north of the Bronx in Westchester County, where she worked multiple jobs simultaneously to keep the household stable, modeling for Sean from his earliest years a combination of work ethic and determination that would become the most defining characteristic of his own professional life. Mount Vernon in the 1970s and 1980s was a community with its own complex social geography, a place where working-class families of multiple backgrounds lived in close proximity and where the cultural energy of New York City was present without the concentrated intensity of the 5 boroughs. Sean grew up in that environment, absorbing the same hip-hop culture that was reshaping New York's cultural landscape during his adolescence, developing the same intuitive understanding of its language, its aesthetics, and its social dynamics that defined the experience of young men who came of age in the New York metropolitan area during that era. He was not a passive participant in that culture. He was someone whose personality and whose ambition pushed him toward its center rather than its edges, toward the people who were making things happen, rather than the people who were watching things happen from a comfortable distance. He attended the Roman Catholic Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx for high school, where his energy and his social intelligence made him a visible and influential presence among his peers. He was not the best student in an academic sense, but he was one of the most perceptive readers of social dynamics, someone who understood instinctively how people made decisions, what motivated them, what impressed them, and what they would respond to with the enthusiasm that he was already learning to generate in the people around him. Those skills were not the skills that high school reward systems were designed to recognize, but they were the skills that would drive everything he subsequently built. If you are enjoying this story so far, now is a great time to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video. There are more stories like this one coming, and you do not want to miss them. Sean enrolled at Howard University in Washington, D.C., one of the most historically significant historically black colleges and universities in America, a school whose alumni list included some of the most accomplished figures in American professional, cultural, and political life. Howard was not simply an academic institution for the students who chose it during the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was a community, a concentrated gathering of ambitious young Black Americans from across the country who arrived with high expectations of themselves and of each other, and whose social and professional networks would prove in many cases to be as valuable as anything the formal curriculum offered. Sean arrived at Howard in 1987 with the same energy and the same social intelligence he had demonstrated in high school, and he found in Washington's proximity to New York and in Howard's cultural vibrancy a platform for the entrepreneurial instincts that were already fully formed even if they had not yet found a clear direction. He commuted regularly between Washington and New York during his time at Howard, spending weekends working as an unpaid intern at Uptown Records, the New York-based label run by Andre Harrell that was one of the most important addresses in the hip-hop and rhythm and blues world of the late 1980s and early 1990s. The internship was unpaid, which meant Sean was absorbing the cost of the commute and the cost of his time in Washington from resources that were already stretched. But he understood that what Uptown Records could teach him about the music business was worth more than any salary he could have earned in a conventional position. He worked with the focused intensity of someone who was not simply doing a job, but was extracting every piece of knowledge and every professional relationship that the environment had to offer. And Andre Harrell recognized Sean's abilities quickly and promoted him from intern to a paid position and then to a more senior role at the label as his contributions to its commercial operations became increasingly difficult to ignore. Sean left Howard before completing his degree to take a full-time position at Uptown, a decision that his mother and his academic advisors found difficult to support, but that he made with the same clarity of conviction that would characterize every significant professional decision he would subsequently make. He understood that the opportunity Uptown represented was time-sensitive in a way that his education was not, and that the knowledge and the relationships he could build inside the music industry at that moment were available to him only if he was present to build them. He was present. At Uptown, Sean developed the production and promotional skills that would form the technical foundation of his music career, working with artists and learning the full commercial and creative process of making and marketing recorded music from one of the most talented and most commercially astute operators in the industry. He absorbed everything with the same thoroughness and the same speed that had characterized his approach to every professional environment he had entered, building expertise and building relationships simultaneously with an efficiency that reflected both his intelligence and the urgency he brought to every professional situation he was in. In 1993, Sean Combs founded Bad Boy Entertainment, the independent record label that would become one of the most commercially successful and culturally influential music enterprises of the 1990s. The founding of Bad Boy was the direct application of everything Sean had learned at Uptown, both what the established music industry did well and what it did not do at all, combined with a specific and original vision for how hip-hop and rhythm and blues could be produced, marketed, and sold to a mainstream American audience without sacrificing the authenticity that gave both genres their cultural power. Bad Boy was not simply a music label. From its earliest days, it was a brand, a coherent identity built around a specific aesthetic, a specific attitude, and a specific promise to its audience about the quality and the energy of what it would consistently deliver. And the commercial success of Bad Boy through the mid-1990s was driven by a roster of artists that Sean assembled with the same talent for identifying and developing potential that Andre Harrell had recognized in him at Uptown, and by a production and marketing approach that combined genuine musical sophistication with an understanding of mainstream commercial appeal that most hip-hop labels of that era had not yet developed. The notorious B.I.G., whose association with Bad Boy produced some of the most commercially and critically successful hip-hop recordings of the 1990s, was the label's most significant artist and the clearest expression of what Sean was building. A form of hip-hop that was simultaneously authentic and accessible, street-rooted and mainstream-reaching, sought without the compromise of either quality that such a combination typically required. The loss of the notorious B.I.G. in March of 1997, shot and killed in Los Angeles at the age of 24, was a personal and professional rupture of the kind that most businesses of Bad Boy's scale and type do not survive. Sean had built the label's commercial identity partly around Biggie's specific talents and specific persona, and the sudden removal of that foundation tested the resilience of everything Sean had constructed with an immediacy and a severity that required a response both personal and professional. His response demonstrated the characteristic that would define his entire career more than any other single quality: the ability to convert loss and adversity into forward momentum rather than allowing them to become reasons for retreat or limitation. He released his own debut album, No Way Out, in July of 1997, 4 months after Biggie's death, and the album became one of the best-selling rap records of that year, entering at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and generating the kind of commercial response that validated Bad Boy's continued viability and established Sean himself as a commercially significant artist rather than simply a behind-the-scenes operator. No Way Out won the Grammy Award for Best Rap Album in 1998, and a recognition that placed Sean's work alongside the most critically respected figures in the genre, and that gave him a cultural platform from which to pursue the broader business ambitions he had been developing throughout his years in the music industry. The founding of Sean John in 1998 was the expression of a business insight that Sean had been developing through years of operating at the center of hip-hop culture and watching the relationship between that culture and the fashion industry with the focused attention of someone who intended to do something about what he was observing. The dynamic was not fundamentally different from the one that Jay-Z and Damon Dash had identified when they launched Rocawear in the same year, in the recognition that hip-hop culture was generating enormous commercial value for fashion brands that were selling to its audience without genuinely understanding or respecting it. But Sean's approach to solving that problem had a specific character that distinguished Sean John from every other fashion brand attempting to operate in the same space. Where most brands built on hip-hop's cultural capital focused primarily on the streetwear and casual categories that the culture's visual vocabulary most immediately suggested, Sean John was designed from the beginning to operate across a broader range of quality levels and product categories, aspiring to the kind of full lifestyle brand status that Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger occupied in the mainstream American fashion market. And Sean had spent years studying those brands with the same focused attention he had brought to every professional environment he had entered, understanding not just what they made, but how they had built the cultural authority that made what they made worth paying a premium for. He believed that a brand rooted in hip-hop culture and built with the same level of design intelligence and material quality that the established luxury brands applied to their work could achieve a comparable level of cultural authority and commercial success, and he was prepared to invest whatever it took to prove that belief correct. The initial Sean John collection launched with a level of design ambition and production quality that surprised the fashion industry, which had not yet fully adjusted its expectations for what a celebrity-founded fashion label was capable of producing. The clothes were not simply branded merchandise capitalizing on Sean's music industry fame. They were genuinely designed products with a clear and specific aesthetic point of view, executed in quality fabrics with construction standards that reflected the seriousness with which Sean was approaching the fashion category. He hired experienced design professionals to work alongside him, bringing the technical expertise that his self-taught fashion education had not provided while maintaining his own creative authority over the aesthetic direction and the brand identity that gave Sean John its specific character. The brand's distribution strategy reflected the same combination of ambition and commercial intelligence that had driven Bad Boy's approach to the music market. Sean John pursued placement in the major department stores that reached the broadest cross-section of the American consumer market, while simultaneously maintaining a brand presentation and a product quality level that justified premium positioning within those retail environments. The goal was to reach the full demographic breadth of the hip-hop audience across every income level and every geography, without the dilution of brand identity that broad distribution typically imposed on fashion labels that had not built their commercial infrastructure carefully enough to support it. The commercial growth of Sean John in the years following its 1998 launch tracked a trajectory that the American fashion industry had rarely witnessed from a brand of its origin and its positioning. Within the first several years of operation, the brand was generating revenue figures that placed it among the most commercially successful fashion labels in the country, driven by a combination of product quality, brand identity, celebrity endorsement from the most visible figure in the brand's own cultural universe, and a distribution strategy that gave the brand access to the full scale of the American consumer market without sacrificing the premium positioning that justified its price points. By the early 2000s, Sean John was generating approximately $250 million in annual revenue, as a figure that transformed the conversation about what a fashion brand founded by a music industry figure could achieve, and that demanded the attention of an industry that had been inclined to treat celebrity fashion ventures as marketing exercises rather than serious design enterprises. The revenue figures were not simply impressive in isolation. They were impressive in context, representing the kind of commercial performance that established fashion brands with decades of history and institutional infrastructure behind them aspired to, but did not always achieve. Produced by a brand that was less than 5 years old and that had been founded by someone with no formal fashion training and no prior experience in the clothing industry. Yet the commercial success was driven by product that consistently delivered on the brand's promise of quality and design intelligence. Sean John's collections across the early 2000s demonstrated a deepening of the brand's aesthetic confidence and technical capability, with each season building on the design foundation established in the previous one and extending the brand's range into new categories and new price points without losing the coherence of the overall identity. The brand's menswear in particular achieved a level of design sophistication that went well beyond what most observers had expected from a music industry entrepreneur, reflecting both Sean's personal investment in the design process and the talent of the professional design team he had assembled to translate his vision into finished product. The fragrance business that Sean John developed during this period contributed significantly to both the brand's revenue and its cultural reach, extending the Sean John name into the daily lives of millions of consumers who engaged with the brand through its scents rather than its clothing. The fragrance launches were executed with the same marketing intelligence and the same commitment to quality production that characterized the clothing line, and they generated the kind of commercial response that validated the brand's status as a genuine lifestyle presence rather than a category-specific fashion label. By the mid-2000s, Sean John was operating at a scale and with a cultural authority that placed it unambiguously in the top tier of American fashion brands, regardless of the category in which it competed. The recognition that meant the most in the context of everything Sean had been building came not from the commercial figures, impressive as they were, but from the judgment of the institution that represented the formal establishment of the American fashion industry. The Council of Fashion Designers of America, known in the industry as the CFDA, is the professional organization that has represented American fashion designers since 1962, and whose annual awards are the most prestigious recognition the American fashion establishment offers to its members. The CFDA Award for Menswear Designer of the Year is not a popularity contest or a commercial achievement award. It is a judgment made by a jury of professional peers about the quality, the originality, and the design significance of a designer's work, evaluated against the full field of American menswear design regardless of category, background, or commercial scale. In 2004, the CFDA named Sean John's founder the Menswear Designer of the Year. The award placed a self-taught designer from Harlem who had entered the fashion industry from the music business without formal training, without institutional credentials, and without the kind of professional pedigree that the established fashion world typically required as the precondition for serious critical recognition, in the company of designers who had spent their entire careers building the kind of critical reputation the CFDA award was designed to recognize. The reaction from the fashion establishment was a combination of genuine respect and surprised acknowledgement, an admission that what Sean John had built over its first 6 years of operation was not simply commercially impressive, but creatively significant in ways that the industry had not fully anticipated. The CFDA recognition was important, not only for what it said about Sean John specifically, but for what it said about the broader question the brand had been implicitly asking since the day it launched, whether a fashion brand rooted in hip-hop culture and founded by a black entrepreneur from Harlem could achieve the same level of critical and institutional recognition as brands founded within the traditional fashion establishment. The answer the CFDA provided in 2004 was unambiguous, and it was an answer that carried consequences for how the industry thought about itself, about who deserved to be taken seriously as a designer, even about the cultural foundations from which genuine fashion innovation could emerge. Sean received the award with the same combination of gratitude and competitive intensity that characterized his public presence in every professional context, acknowledging the recognition while making clear that the work it honored was the product of genuine creative intention rather than accidental success. He spoke about the responsibility the award represented, about what it meant for the designers who would come after him from similar backgrounds and similar starting points, and about the specific vision that had driven Sean John from its founding to its current position in the American fashion landscape. His acceptance was neither falsely modest nor inappropriately self-congratulatory. It was the statement of someone who had known exactly what he was trying to build, and who was now standing in front of the most authoritative audience in his industry, receiving confirmation that he had built it. The Sean John story is a story about the audacity of believing that you belong in a room that has not yet invited you in, and then behaving as if the invitation is already in the mail until the room has no choice but to acknowledge that you were right. Sean Combs operated from the beginning with a certainty about the quality and the legitimacy of what he was building that the evidence available at the time did not yet support, and that the industry's conventional wisdom actively contradicted. He launched a fashion brand with no formal training in an industry with high barriers to critical recognition, and aimed it at the most demanding levels of the market, invested in the quality and the design intelligence that premium positioning required, and then waited for the industry to catch up to what he had already decided was true. The CFDA award was the moment the industry caught up, but by the time it arrived, Sean had already built $250 million in annual revenue, had already dressed some of the most visible figures in American popular culture, and had already demonstrated through 6 years of consistent commercial performance that the brand's success was not a celebrity marketing phenomenon, but a genuine expression of design vision executed at a commercially meaningful scale. The award was confirmation of what the market had already decided, one which is the most credible form of critical recognition available to any designer in any category. What Sean John proved was the same thing that every story in this series has ultimately been about, that the most powerful form of expertise is the expertise that comes from genuine and deep immersion in the culture you are designing for, and that the most valuable asset a brand builder can possess is the ability to see an unmet need with enough clarity and enough conviction to build a business around it before anyone else has confirmed that the business is worth building. Sean saw that the audience hip-hop had created deserved a fashion brand that served them with the same level of design intelligence and quality aspiration that the established luxury brands brought to their work, and he built that brand at a time when the evidence for its commercial viability was entirely absent and the institutional resistance to its cultural premises was entirely present. The boy from Harlem who lost his father at 2 years old, who watched his mother work multiple jobs to keep the family together in Mount Vernon, who commuted from Washington to New York on his own resources to work for free at a music label, because he understood what it would teach him, built something that the most respected institution in American fashion eventually had to recognize on the merits. He built it through the same combination of vision, discipline, and refusal to accept the limits that other people's expectations imposed that has driven every significant achievement documented in this channel's ongoing series on the founders of American fashion. The circumstances he started from were not a qualification for success. They were simply the circumstances he started from, and he built from them exactly what he believed was possible. That is the story of Sean John. And if you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. If this story gave you something to think about or something to take with you, drop a comment below and tell us what landed. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this one. There are more coming, and you do not want to miss them.